Hi everyone, welcome to our fourth Artist Talk, 4 out of 12. And our artist today is Mary Siple, whose work, Salmonella?
Yeah, Siple actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's Siple, my last name. Actually, it's pronounced Siple.
Mispronunciation.
It's okay.
S-I-T-L-E.
Yes.
Siple. If I can goof up the name, I'm going to do
No, everybody does.
Right.
It's okay.
Welcome, Murray.
Thank you. We're just trying to get the tech on the slideshow working. Are we good to go, do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's fine. Okay, so obviously I have a disability. I'm starting the slideshow with this slide because in 1996 I was filming snowboarding and skateboarding all around the world and ended up in a car accident, not related to snowboarding or skateboarding, but the car accident was caused because I got into a vehicle with a driver that was drunk and high on drugs, and I didn't know. It was 6 o'clock at night, and I hadn't seen him for a while, so I got in his car, and he wanted to show me how fast it went, but I didn't intend to drive anywhere with him. So he stepped on the gas and drove us over a cliff immediately. Like within 100 meters we were over a cliff. It was very fast. And we landed 40 feet below on the roof of the car. My neck broke and I could move everything, so I wasn't paralyzed. When I got to the emergency room already had a few drunk driving accidents. This was in Kamloops, so the emergency room was packed. And they called in a doctor who had been drinking. And he also was on drugs. And he got the x-ray, and I begged him to not move me because I heard my neck break. I knew it was broken. And he said, "No, you're fine. We're going to let you go home. We need the bed." And he took the collar off and the neck broke and I became paralyzed. So that ended like a long career of snowboarding and skateboarding and traveling the world and left me quadriplegic. And he ended up driving his car off a cliff 2 months after and killed himself. So that's how I ended up like this. And a lot of people thought that's terrible, that's the end of Murray. He's going to be, my dad actually referred to me as a vegetable at one point. And I just remember, like, I am not going to let that slow me down in any way. So my first goal in rehab was to learn to draw again. And because I'd been in Emily Carr, I'd learned to draw. And drawing was a way of me learning to express myself, how I was dealing with the whole 1 year of rehab. And once I was able to get out of rehab, the first thing I started to do was try and get my old lifestyle back by traveling. And traveling as a quadriplegic is not that easy. So I'd spent years like, okay, I'm going to fly to London, see what happens. I'm going to fly to Barcelona, see what happens. Fly to Mexico, and I just kept testing every situation out, every type of plane, every type of getting onto boats, everything. So my rehab was learning to travel again. Once I could travel, I became independent. I actually went around the world by myself, which I was supposed to stay at home, get 4 hours of care a day, and take medications. I do none of those, and it's been 23 years actually next weekend because it was on Thanksgiving. So I draw. Thanks. I mean, that's what this whole slideshow is about, is showing my creative process. A lot happened between that time and now. I went back to filmmaking. I made a film for the National Film Board of Canada called Carts of Darkness, about homeless people on the North Shore and how they collect bottles and ride their carts down the hill. I designed my own house, which won 3 design awards and was in 25 magazines. And I started painting because filmmaking was too technical and I wanted to work with my hands. So I'll just start the slideshow now, if you don't mind clicking through. I'll just keep prompting you.
I haven't got the touch of it.
That's okay. I think we went way too far ahead already.
It's not doing what I thought.
Yeah, this is acting funny for us.
Hang on.
Yeah, no problem. Can everybody hear me okay?
Kaylee?
Yep.
Scrolling was a little bit of a disaster. Faster, okay.
Oh, we gotta scroll.
It's a matter of speed.
Okay.
Okay, I can do it now.
So here's my van. It's adapted so I can drive. On the passenger side, there's a lift. The power doors open, a lift comes out. I can get in, I transfer into the driver's seat. And I've driven this thing 250,000 kilometers now and probably bought it 5 times with how many times I've had to put parts into it. But it's still going, and I drove it to Mexico last year with my girlfriend. We lived there for 6 months. Next. To give me luck on the trip, my mom crocheted me some sun visors. Next. So after driving through the States, obviously we end up in Mexico and saw so many banana and palm trees. On the bottom is mostly banana trees and lots of palm trees. And we didn't really drive to a resort area. We drove to a town that only had 1,000 people in it, not a corporate thing in sight. So we were mostly always on the back roads of Mexico. Next, please. A lot of windy highways. The van made it fine. We took out a few butterflies. Next. And then we ended up at the little house that we rented, and we built a simple platform ramp. And on the left here, behind the van, is a little garage that was too small for the van to fit in, which ended up becoming my painting studio by accident, because when I drove to Mexico, I had no plans to actually paint. I went to write a book. And I started writing, and I kind of got bored. And on the way into town, I noticed there was a house paint shop. And, well, every town in Mexico has house paint because people are constantly changing the colors of their buildings. And I went in there, and all they had was primary colors. So it was fantastic because here, well, in North Van where I live, it's funny that they have a color of the month and it's always gray. So it was nice to get there and find colors. Next, please. So on the drive, we saw this image everywhere. It was either spray painted on houses. There was tons of roadside graves. And this is the Virgin of Guadalupe, who is the Mexican version of the Virgin Mary. The second coming of the Virgin Mary was apparently in Mexico. So I just saw this all the time and didn't really give much thought about it. And it sort of seeped into my psyche, and I always started drawing it. So I'll just go to the next slide. Next one, please. I'm going to show a bunch of images of the area where we were living, just kind of to show how the area crept into my work. You'll see it come out in the paintings that I'm going to show in a bit. But to get beer, you basically had to go to a jail and go through this guy to get the beer every day. Next, please. This was a path outside of our house, and this is a text message I sent to my girlfriend because I went to go into the village one day by myself. And it was always a struggle. There was always some obstacle, but here was 2 horses, and I'm scared of horses, and I refused to go between the 2. So I wrote her this text message. Come get me. Next one, please. This is a blurry image, unfortunately, but it's in the local bar, and it had this cow skull, which, you know, you see them everywhere really down there, but it's behind the cow skull that was interesting. There's kind of this ghouly Virgin of Mary shape, which I don't know if they did on purpose or not, but I took a photo so I can incorporate it into the paintings later. Next one, please. And this is the store across the street, which was a 92-year-old woman, I think she was at the time. She lived not outside, but in tents, and sold candy every day. Next one, please. And this was the coffee shop, which had like burned down or something in a recent incident. I'm not sure what had happened. Next one, please. And this is some, I just thought this was an interesting texture and shows some of the like harshness of Mexico. Like I wasn't sure if it was mold or not, but it was actually from an explosion. I don't know why. Someone blew up something and just left an interesting mark that was kind of like leopard-like. And we actually that area is part of a Jaguar protection zone. So everywhere in our neighborhood was, you know, Jaguar signage, and you'd see the Jaguar trucks come, the guys that protected the Jaguars. So that kind of print worked its way into my paintings later as well. Next one, please. Just, there's always chickens in Mexico everywhere. Next one. This is in the church, which I thought it was kind of an interesting, sorry, it's a hard slide to line up. Below is a modern family of Mexico, and above is sort of an old school religious scene. And this kind of stuff works its way into my work later as well. Next one, please. And they had every night we'd try and sleep. We got there in November, and there was constant parades and fireworks. And we thought, wow, how great, what a fun town this is. But what we learned was this was the Virgin of Guadalupe celebrations, and the fireworks were given off by the Catholic Church because their intent was to wake up the Virgin Mary. So for 2.5 weeks while we were there, it was constant fireworks. And they were firecrackers, and they were cannonball loud. Like, I woke up in bed a few times thinking we actually may have been in a cartel war. And we were frightened. Like, it was an interesting thing. And so we'd see this image being carried around again and again, and they actually have a virgin. They select a teenager from the town and parade her around. And on the night of the final event, I didn't ask how that ended, but it was just fascinating. I'm like, you have a 13-year-old in the back of a truck with like dressed like this, and everybody was okay with it. Next, please. There was a lot of witchcraft stores. It looks evil, but most of these are designed to either honor someone that had passed away or bring luck. For me, I always see them as a little bit dark, but it was interesting to go into some markets. Some were 3 or 4 stories high of just witchcraft stuff. Herbs and potions and these kind of knickknacks. Next one. This is a giant sculpture of kind of a deer man. You can see by the stairways how this is like 10 stories high. It's kind of a fascinating sculpture I'd never seen before or heard of. Next, please. And this says El Chapo. Everybody probably has heard of that guy by now. And so this graffiti was all over our local town, and he had some activity in our town and that state, Nayarit state. But later I learned this was a country band. It wasn't El Chapo. Next, please. And here's some of a picture of the fireworks going off, or the firecrackers. Next, please. And then obviously we were on a ocean side, and the beach always had some type of carcasses showing up. Next. One day this is from the internet because I didn't get a picture of it, but there was a lot of dead farm animals. Always, like you always were dealing with a dead farm animal one day or another. Either it was blocking a road dead and no one had moved it, or you'd smell something, or the way animals were treated there it was unbelievable how poorly animals were treated. So that kind of started to burn into me in my artwork as well. Keep going, please. Here's more local graffiti. This is a phoenix for some politician. I'm not sure the relevance, but I like the font. Next, please. Another phoenix with a snake. So I always felt like I was surrounded by some type of evil or nastiness, and the elements were harsh. And next, please. Just a local doorway with an old gun and a saw blade and more Mexican kind of darkness. Next, please. And this was the beach. Like I said, we weren't in any resort area, so the local beach was as simple as a barbecue pit, coconut husking because everybody wanted coconut water. And there's a horse in the background, and that horse couldn't believe it. You know, you'd see videos of these, or even in the local towns that were more touristy, you'd see dancing horses. Everybody would be so happy about it, like, great, a dancing horse. But we'd go to the beach and they were training it to dance, and we'd have to leave because they whip its ankles with chains to make it dance, and they wouldn't stop for 4 or 8 hours. So the horse would wake up, go to this beach, and be trained to dance with chains. But at night, they'd go into town and put a little flowers around its neck and put a drunk cowboy on the back, and they'd have competitions of whose horse lifted its legs the highest while it danced. But the tourists would think that was great, but they had no idea that they were getting chained on the beach. Next, please. And here's another one of the horses not being fed, just chained to a brick wall, like all day, no water. And then at night, dressed up and taken into the village to show how it can dance. Next, please. And I started drawing on the beach when there wasn't any horse training. And this is just a local fish lady. Next, please. And here's the paper stands amazed me. They'd have, every day was another cartel execution and bikini ads on the cover. Like, it's crazy. I took so many pictures of this because I just thought, what are they thinking when they're looking at the paper? Are they looking for girls or death? I don't know. Next, please. And then there was a weird amount of headless statues around our town that nobody was able to give me an explanation on. Next, please. Another Virgin Mary parade, the teenager at the front being the Virgin, I guess. Next, please. Me just trying to ease all this stuff down with some tequila while the cops drive by. Everywhere we ate was like, you usually eat on the street. The tables were put onto the street. So you'd be that close to traffic whipping by, and there was always some type, either a military truck or actual cops. And I don't know who was defending who. Sometimes I believe the cartel was actually the ones that the people in town liked. And they didn't like when the cops came. And they had points every block. There was a local either on a rooftop or on a chair. They'd have a cell phone and they would call in, okay, this policeman's coming, so they knew, they had like an organization of knowing who was coming around through town. Next, please. This is a gas station, and I just included this because we thought, okay, we'll go to a bigger town and just kind of get out of this darkness for a bit. And I stopped my girlfriend got out, went to use the bathroom, and I thought, this is fine. Look, it's a bigger place. Everything looks good. Well, those two men went to she's in a bathroom here, and these two guys walked up. This guy, you can barely see, he has a sword, and this guy has a bat. And I'm in my van, and she's in there, and I think I better phone her because there's guys outside with a bat and a sword. Well, I look at my dash, and her phone is here. So she went to the bathroom without her phone. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. So I drove my van over and kind of wedged in between the two, honked my horn. She came out and got in, wondering what was going on, and those guys were there. So just couldn't escape all this kind of darkness, cartel land. Next, please. There's an incredible amount of garbage in all sorts of places. I'm not even sure what this was, but I thought it was an interesting photo with the textures and the landscape. Next, please. Just a local market. Next, please. The dog that we ended up adopting down there, but she loved dead seafood, and we always had to prevent her from trying to eat this kind of stuff. Next, please. And that's not our dog, but this is common roof dogs. It's security down there, so every time you walk by, they just bark and threaten you all the time. Next, please. And this is a monument to something, or an old gas station. I'm not sure why, but the sunbeam that it kind of creates worked its way into my paintings that are coming up. Next, please. This was the one day I saw something cool that wasn't darkness. There was finally waves breaking, and a really good surfer went out, and I'd never seen surfing where someone actually got some air. Like, it's normally just simple carving. This guy was really good, so it was great to get some relief. Next, please. And this is the local beach bar. I just love the primary colors. Next, please. More primary colors. This is actually one of the witch markets. You can see how giant they are. This big mall is all dedicated to witchcraft. Next, please. More Virgin Mary shrineage. Next, please. This is just kind of funny. This is a watermelon truck towing a watermelon truck. I'd never seen that before. Next, please. And there, we call it Mexlish. Just signs were written wrong all the time, but it gave us some humor. Next, please. I don't know if anybody can guess what this is, but it's a whale skull, and it's huge. It would be the length of this wall. It was at a skate park we went to, and someone had brought it. The skate park owner's dad brought it up one time, and it hadn't fully cleared itself of all the flesh and everything, so it really stunk, but it was giant. Next, please. So finally, after all that, I started to paint. And this is the first image I did on our garage wall. And it's kind of based on both the Virgin Mary with the hood, but also missing my friends at home. We all are in the skateboard and snowboard community, and we all wear hoodies. Everybody seems to wear a hoodie. So I just thought, I'm going to draw a picture that I remember of my friends when I showed up. And they'd be like, Murray, what's up? So this kind of just gave me a bit of an anchor down there in all that darkness. Next, please. And right around the corner from my studio was cockfighting. So I'd be painting and I'd hear cockfighting. I never actually got a picture because as badly as I wanted to go, my girlfriend was against it. So this is just an image from the internet. Next, please. And then the painting in the garage started to grow. Banana trees. I just painted over an old hot water heater that was left in there. There's a red cow skull. we're mostly vegetarian. My girlfriend's vegetarian, and we went to an actual vegetarian restaurant in this town, which was rare, but it was right across the street from the butcher. So we went at night, and the butcher was closed, thankfully, but they brought in a cow anyways, and it was in pieces in the back of a pickup truck. So we were eating our veggie dinner, and we watched a cow come out of the truck in parts while we ate. Next, please. And then this is just me painting at night. I did a lot of painting at night, which seemed like a good idea at the time because of the heat, but that means more bugs and more like night creatures that I didn't know were going to enter the studio. Next, please. So here's one of the giant, I don't know what type of bug it is, but it's like fist size. And they'd fly in and hit the wall, and you'd think someone threw a tennis ball at you. It was big. Next, please. Scorpions, of course. Next, please. And then now, so somewhere the darkness is starting to show up. The cockfighting, a rooster with no head, and that bull skull image that you saw earlier from the restaurant. Next, please. These are just a variety of the candles I'd picked up to put in the studio, mostly religious. Next, please. And this is the paint that I was buying. It's a Comex paint. I found out later that it's Sherwin-Williams. They have the same stuff here. But theirs was more plasticky. I'm not sure why, but I like it a lot better. I almost want to order a bunch, but shipping would be expensive. Next, please. I don't know if anybody knows this image, but it's from a Dr. Seuss movie called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. Terwilliger. It's about a piano camp that kids are sent to, and there's 500 kids sent to this piano camp, and it turned out to be a bit of a prison. And this is one of the, next please. This is one of the prison guys that he'd lower the elevator into the prison of this piano camp. And I don't know, I'd seen it as a kid and it horrified me. And there's something about it that reminded me of Mexico, so I started incorporating it into the paintings. Next, please. And these are a bunch of the dogs that lived outside. The one on the left we ended up taking home. She's a sweetheart. Next, please. So this is another one of the garage walls finished, and there's that image of the Dr. Terwilliger guy. El Chapo, I ended up putting a dress on him right before I left because I didn't want to get in any trouble. The image on the right is kind of a thing from a sweet potato cart. I don't know if any of you have seen those, but a sweet potato cart gives off a highly irritating whistle when the potatoes are done. Next, please. More Virgin Mary candles. Next, please. And there's a gecko trying to eat a giant light bulb sized moth. I think the moth won. This is in my studio as well. Next, please. Next, please. And this is also outside the studio. One day I went out for a coffee and a cigarette, and this bull showed up really angry. And I had no idea what to do. But next, please. The dogs chase it away. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So I ran out of room in the garage. I'd painted all the walls around. And through Instagram, I was getting feedback on my paintings that I was doing good. One friend suggested I should get going on painting on canvas. So it became my mission to go and find some art stores and buy some canvas. But there was none. There was no art stores. Even in the bigger towns like Puerto Vallarta or Guadalajara, I couldn't find anything other than, craft stores, which totally surprised me in Mexico. I thought that's a place you can get art supplies anywhere you want. So to find canvas, I was hunting around. I tried Amazon. It was really expensive to get canvas shipped down. And I noticed there was these election signs. They're canvas, digitally printed on. Next, please. There's another one advertising for a university, which is really weird in the town that I lived in, because everybody was in the cartel or sold coconut water. Next, please. And then I noticed on the back it's framed. This is a terrible picture, but it's a canvas that's framed. So I had the idea to start putting a bounty out on these signs. Next, please. And so locals were getting the signs down for me for 100 pesos to 200 pesos, depending on the sign. And it was really fun because the election was over, so they're expired, so I didn't really think anybody would care until I found out that, again, the cartel backed these politicians, and some people wanted to keep the signs because to prove that they were part of that political party. Next, please. So the signs were everywhere. This one in particular that guy's taking down has a rip in it, and I love the rip. It's in a painting that you'll see a little later. Next, please. And then here they are at night. They would also bring them in at night so nobody would see them because they were scared that someone was going to get mad at them for taking them down. Here he's just putting it in my garage. Next, please. And then I started covering them up with black paint, and that ended up becoming my sort of trademark. Now all my paintings are black backgrounds, and it really helps my painting process because just painting the canvas black means I've started the painting. I start to get images in my head of how I can work that canvas with a design. Whereas when you start with white, it's really intimidating because now you've got a fresh, clean, nice thing to start on, and it's just not inspiring. But if you just paint it black, it feels right away you're already into it. Next, please. So, yeah, now I'm fully getting into it. Next, please. And at this time, I had to stay hydrated with tequila because I've got Chapo on my wall in a dress, and I've stolen all the town's election signs. Next, please. And this was just my cleaning station because some of the signs had been up for a year or more, and they just were moldy. Next, please. And then just starting to paint over them with black. Next, please. That's a finished one. I loved how it was like not perfect. Everything was crinkly and crusty. Actually, when I sent them home, they're covered in dirt and dust and mold and bugs, and they still are that way. I didn't wipe them off at all. I like that. They smell like Mexico. Next, please. This is on the beach. This says, "Don't hurt the fish or make the ocean angry." I just thought it was a good sign for the locals to have up that someone cared because the oceans were bad. And tourists did show up and treat the place pretty badly. Next, please. This is one of the local statues. I'm not sure what the baby has. I think it's ribbons, but to me it's a fish. So I ended up putting that into one of the paintings. Next, please. A friend of mine had saw a deer swimming over in Pender Harbor. The deer were in the ocean, and he told me about it, and I was bugging him to get it on video, and I knew he never would. But that idea of me wanting to capture it stuck in my head. I don't know, I researched an image of a horse, somehow showing that like maybe that could be a good image to bring into a painting I wanted to do on ocean pollution. Next image, please. So here's the sculpture that I'd seen with the baby holding a fish. Next image. And garbage in the ocean. Plastic bags, obviously. Next image, please. And then like a finished canvas. So this is one of the first ones I did to see how the primary colors would work out. Next, please. And this is a kids park in one of the towns we drove through, but these octopus rides, I don't know what they are. You sit on them and wiggle back and forth. I guess they were really dangerous. They were all rusty and sharp. But they're a really nice shape. So they become part of a painting. Next, please. This is a election sign. I thought an octopus over this woman's face was perfect because a lot of the area that we were in was being sold off to resorts and stuff like that. So I felt the politicians weren't doing the locals any good. And I think an octopus was a good image for her. Next, please. And then the Jaguar Reservoir. Next, please. We went to the beach when we could. I never could actually get down to the water. I'm used to not being able to do that. But this image of my girlfriend kind of looking for shells worked its way into painting. Next, please. And there was always people selling skulls. This was a child with a case of beer and some skulls. Next, please. So there's my girlfriend, local imagery working its way into the paintings. Next, please. And the jaguar in a hoodie and the rooster covered in blood. Next, please. There was a lot of teenagers with babies, a lot. It kind of shocked us. Like most women under 18 had 3 children already in that town. So wherever we went, we'd just see women. And I was Googling for like Mexican teenager with baby to find an image to work into a painting, and I could only find Kim Kardashian every time. I don't know how that worked. Next, please. So I used Kim Kardashian instead of a local Mexican with a baby, but it works. Next, please. And then this one got a frame of, they had a lot of bricks around their windows with holes in it. I guess that was kind of like not only a stylistic thing, but an air conditioning type thing. Next, please. There's a lot of stray cats, and they just work their way into our house because they could smell food. So we'd come into any room, and there'd be a kitten or 3 kittens had gotten in. Next, please. So they work their way into my paintings. And I don't know if you can see because of the brightness, but on this particular election sign, there's lots of leftover fonts because they were raised through the back of the election sign. So it's kind of nice because those paintings now you can still see that they are actually election signs, even though they're coated in black. Next. My girlfriend's sister. I want to do a painting dedicated to both of them. So next, please. I started working on this one. Next, please. There's me actually at work.
Did you just have candlelight to work with?
I had a terrible light bulb, so it was mostly that light bulb and candlelight. Yeah. One light bulb in a room this big. Yeah. Next, please. It was fun because it was, it was pretty simple lifestyle. Everything was cheap. I mean, it's dirt floor and like there was no protection. I was always wondering if someone was going to go in there and rip off my stuff, but no one cared about a Canadian in a wheelchair painting in a room by himself. So no one really went in there or anything. Next, please. Sunflowers were everywhere there, so they obviously got into my paintings. Next, please. Next, please. I don't read very much, so I finally started reading down there. I started picking through a bunch of classics, and the hands that are on the front of that novel I really liked, so they crept into the painting as well. Next, please. So I made these kind of like cartel death hands with sunflowers. Next, please. Next, please. So here's the sweet potato cart. You can, by now I think you're seeing how the local things were really working into my paintings. Next, please. That's an actual sweet potato cart. And so what's happening is they've got coals inside and they're baking potatoes, and there's a chimney right there in the shadow of my hand, and it would blast this whistle, and it just freaked us out. We were never used to it. There was no rhyme or reason to when it would go off. Next, please. And kind of a gruesome photo, but there was death like constantly around us. Helicopters in nearby villages were known to stray entire blocks of a village just because there was some drug activity there, and we'd constantly hear about it. Next, please. And on our road trips, as we were driving around, we'd see bodies, or we'd see coolers where they shouldn't be. I'm not even going to say what was in them. We'd hear about locals in our village that their family in another village were killed for no reason. So it just worked its way into my work. Next, please. Another roadside grave image. Next, please. Next, please. We rented a boat and went out one day, and my girlfriend dove down and pulled up starfish. In her other hand, you can see behind the starfish is actually some coral, and the coral she could bring up because it was laying all dead on the seafloor, and the boat driver was telling us that all the coral in that area died because of the resort water up ocean. The pool water is constantly being drained into that area, and it would come up and kill the coral reef from all the chlorine. So we ended up having a bit of a hate for resorts just because the people never really experienced real Mexican culture, and then the environmental damage that resorts provide is nasty. Next, please. So I kind of incorporated the ocean, the Virgin Mary, and the coral in this piece. Next, please. A local that I became friends with because he's the tattoo artist. Next, please. So I started to get some of the work that I was doing on the wall on my arm so I could bring it home, because I knew I'd never be able to bring anything from that garage home. Next, please. And that's the skull that, or the bull skull that I did on the wall. This guy that was a tattooist was interesting. His name was Bobby, and he'd lived in LA, but he got charged for something that he wouldn't let me know, and did 20 years in prison, then got kicked back to Mexico. But he did good tattoo work. And then he ended up kind of being my protection, although I didn't need any protection. It's always good to have a guy like that in those kind of towns. Next, please. So finally, our time was up, and I had a friend across the street roll up my canvases, take them off the frames, and I shipped them back home. Next, please. And then when they got home, I had to rebuild my own frames. There's a friend of mine helping me out. And then next, please. Slowly use these Mexican upholstery nails to tack them back onto the frames so they look like they used to. Next, please. And then there's a finished one put back together. Next, please. And then I got a show almost right away. It was super satisfying to go through that whole process and all that darkness, and then to get a show. This is the Bank of Montreal Theatre Centre in Olympic Village in downtown Vancouver. Next, please. There's the pieces going up. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. And then I started painting in my own home studio in Vancouver. If you don't mind just going through a bunch of these, I put a bunch of my work that I've done at home since I got back. Most of these are zodiac signs. You can just keep going. There's quite a few. So I'm trying to incorporate what I learned in Mexico with more of our local animals and landscapes. This is a Ogopogo drawing because there was so many forest fires up there. You can keep going. I love this one with the bear and the crow deer. And stop here for a sec. These are, I wanted to show the paintbrushes that I use. You can go to the next one. I use only flat ones because the way my hands, like my fingers don't work individually, so I can't grab many things. So if I get a flat handled paintbrush, I could wind it between my fingers and get a grip on it, and that helps me hold the paint. But I can't do small details. I often get asked like what I paint, and I know they're wondering if I can paint like really specific things. That's why I work with silhouettes mostly, because I can just do that. That's all. But I've learned to do it good enough now. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. Next, please. So few of my friends use spray paint when they paint, so I wanted to try it out. Now I'm kind of incorporating it into my work. This one's not finished. Next, please. And I also use my phone while I paint, so I'll take a picture of what I'm working on, and then I'll use, in the image viewer of the phone, you can paint over stuff. Pretty simple. So I use it just to help me build where I'm going next. Next, please. And next, please. And it's almost finished, this one, but it's still a work in progress. Next, please. This is another painting. I started to work, my new work is based on like my disability and my car accident. So when I was injured in that car crash, I felt a blue spark jump out of my neck. I know it sounds kind of like, sure, a blue spark, but it really did. When the doctor took the collar off, I really felt like a giant beam. It was like all of my abilities and my skills and everything was lost in this spark. So I've been working on this drawing, or painting. The silver inside the Virgin Mary is actually reflective paint. So if you go to the next slide, when you take a flash photo of it, it kind of blasts. It was just an experiment. I'm trying to work it into some of the stuff I do. So if something's shown in a gallery and someone used a flash photo, when they get home, they're going to see extra stuff, which is hard to technically do with a painting. You're stuck with just how it is, but I thought by using reflective paint, I can add a technical element that would surprise people later. Next, please. This is a commission, my first commission. My friend's parents are huge golf fans, so they wanted a golf painting, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. I don't know how to do a golf painting. So I kind of made them this like Black Sabbath golf painting. And the woman on the left is their mother, so the grandmother of my friend, and the image on the right is Ben Hogan, my friend's dad's favorite golfer, and Augusta golf course. But I just used my style of primary colors and darkness, and it turns out they loved it. They send me pictures of it all the time, and very satisfied to have done a golf piece. Next, please. And then more Virgin Mary still creeping around. Next, please. And then I started to do some self-portraits, like sorting me as a Virgin Mary, I guess. Next, please. One of the tools I use when I paint, and you'll see in another slide or two ahead, is I use these pencil crayons. They're a little thicker than most pencil crayons, like the girth around them, and the pencil crayon itself is kind of oily, so when you use it on paint, you can control whether it's going to stay on the painting or not. So if I was to use it on this wall, I could rub it off, or I could use water and wash it off, or I could use a clear medium and go over it and keep it on. So I have this control over this pencil crayon that you'll see in the following slides, but the trouble is sharpening them. I haven't figured out a way to do it because they don't fit into any pencil sharpeners. And with my hands and a knife trying to do it is like a disaster. So this photo is just my setup of a clamp and a razor blade and a broken pencil because it's just not a good scene. Next, please. So here you can see where I was using the pencil crayon, and I purposely make a lot of mistakes. I don't want to erase anything, and then I decide what of those pencil crayon markings I want to keep by how I put either a medium wash over it to keep them, or just kind of pure water with a brush and it takes it right off. So it's kind of fun because as you paint, you can draw more and paint that, and if there's a little bit left over and it looks cool, I can leave it and keep painting, or I can totally get rid of it. Next, please. This is kind of a weird image because in Vancouver we have so many people on these scooters and hoverboards and mono electric boards, and it drives me nuts. So this painting's called Dunce because it's kind of like, what are you doing with all this stuff? There's a simple skateboard that's always worked, and I don't know, I guess I incorporated the islands in the background and a bit of a disability with the wheel. Next, please. And that's just a detail of it. Next, please. This one is more about disability because when I'd go to certain parties or events and there was a barrier, someone would always say, "Oh, go help Murray, he doesn't have legs." I get what they're trying to say, but I have legs. They're just paralyzed. So I thought it would be funny if I got a tattoo of legs on my arm so I could say, "I've got legs." And I was on the way to get the tattoo, and I had a coffee with a friend of mine. She said it's funny that I was getting that because the night before she had a dream that if I put a leg in a pylon and a top hat, I could get up and walk really fast. So that became the tattoo, and then it became the painting. It's funny because it would be great to walk again, but obviously it's not entirely important. I'm able to travel and do all this stuff. There's smaller issues that are way more important. I mean, if I can get my hands to work, that would be a giant help. Like walking would be great, sure, but it's the little things. I have no trunk control. I'm paralyzed from here down, so I have no balance. You'll notice I'm constantly holding myself up. If I don't, I'll just fall over. Trunk control would be, if they figured out how to give me stomach muscles back, it would be incredible. My life would change, but walking is the furthest from my needs right now. Next, please. So this is a big 3 by 5 foot painting. These are ferns that I actually saw here on Salt Spring on a visit in June. Often you'll see a wall of ferns, like a cliff wall of ferns, and I've always loved that. But I always hated it too because that's kind of where my car accident happened, was over a wall of ferns. So I made this fern wall with the spine in it, and there's one little leaf that points to, oh thank you, right there. That's where my C6 and 7 vertebrae broke. So it's kind of subtle, but to me, I call this one midnight malpractice because that's the time that the doctor caused my paralysis. And there's something about ferns that are spine-like. It just worked out to be a good composition. Next, please. We're almost done. So, yeah, I wanted to incorporate more local wildlife into my work. Next, please. So I started drawing seals. I don't know what it is about them, but they're kind of fascinating to me. There was a seal versus octopus battle in Oak Bay about 5 years ago that made the news because someone put it on YouTube, And I love that idea of a seal trying to take down an octopus or vice versa. I actually did a submission for a sculpture to Oak Bay about it, but they were like, oh, it didn't happen in Oak Bay, it happened in the bay over, and I never got that commission. Next, please. But I started, this is all pencil crayon, like I was showing you earlier, so eventually I'll paint over this. But I'm just incorporating a little bit of all the things that I've been seeing so far. There's a hand on this, on my wheel at the bottom, because there's always, you know, I could use help once in a while, but generally I get around the world okay with my body like this. But it's funny, sometimes people will offer me help to get over something and they'll pick up my wheel, but my wheel spins, so they're not doing, they're actually possibly going to knock me out. So it's interesting, it's a fine line to straddle, to accept help and not accept help. And you can only accept help so much, and then you get used to it. So I prefer no help, just so I can do things myself. Next, please. And then this is the painting finished. And this is also big, it's 3 feet by 5 feet. I use the wall to clean my brushes, and I'm starting to like it now a lot. It's a lot more expressive than my graphic style. So I think in the future I'm going to start just not caring about straight lines anymore and just clean my brushes for the whole painting. Next, please. The Whistler Skateboard Park had a call out for graffiti on their skate pool, and so I did 25 ghosts and they took it. Next, please. And I had a friend spray paint it on the bowl for me. It's actually wider, but it's okay, you get the idea. Next, please. I wanted to show something about, like, I visit a lot of art galleries, and my girlfriend thinks it's funny because I rarely actually sit back and look at the work. I always look at the craftsmanship. You learn a lot from just seeing how they, like, what material they chose, how they framed it, what paints they used, how they put them on there, what their styles were. So this is an Andy Warhol show in San Francisco, and I always thought his stuff was super cartoon and pop, like obviously he's a pop artist, but his skills of craftsmanship were amazing. So I always take notes on how they do stuff, and I work it back into mine. Next, please. Next, yeah. Oh, we froze. Oh, there we go. And then I use my phone. It's my notebook most of the time, but I just write my notes on there. And here he used silver as a background, as you know, black is my background, but it kind of got interesting to me. So next, please. And then he used colored shadows. I never really seen that outside of comic books. Next, please. And then he used gold spray paint, but it wasn't spray painted on. He'd spray paint into a bucket, get all the spray paint out of the can, and then he'd roll it on with a roller. I never understood how he got some of his textures, but by looking closely at it and trying to figure out how he'd done stuff, and everything was so nicely framed, like not just he didn't just go to a frame store and said, put this in a frame. He figured out the wood, the nails, the everything down to the details. Next, please. And then I came home and I painted this. I kind of used his roller technique, silver paint on orange background. Next, please. And I also started doing sculpture. So I made a Virgin Mary sculpture with horns. And it's about this tall, it's 4.5 feet tall. It's made of styrofoam, which a friend carved for me, and we coated it in fiberglass and painted it with auto paint. And I recently just sold it. Now we're going to do a couple more versions of this. Next, please. And that's the backside. This is a show I had in Gastown. Next, please. And we're getting near the end. This is a sketch for the car crash that I was in. I want to do like the painting Guernica by Picasso has always fascinated me with the chaos that's going on in it. Can you go to the next one? This is a detail of Picasso's Guernica. Next, please. And then this is a work in progress of that drawing. I call it Guernica. Because this is what happened to me in one night. It wasn't the bombing of a village, but it was the end of my athletic career anyways. So I incorporated the things that all happened that night in Kamloops. Next, please. I started sketching, trying to figure out some new designs using that Virgin Mary. This is her stripping, I guess, as a deer. Next, please. And this is me being put into bed once I was paralyzed by two Virgin Mary nurses. Skateboard at the foot of the bed. Next, please. In the paper was a bunch of salmon jaws one day, and I thought they were really shark-like. And we have a salmon problem, obviously, so I started to take note of salmon. Next, please. And next, please. So I moved the salmon jaw into this Virgin Mary, added horns to give her more of a threat. Next, please. It's hard to see in the light, but there is a sketch here in the background, and it's of, in Montreal, a preacher, pastor, I forget the name of a Catholic priest, was stabbed. And I wanted to make a painting of that because I just thought that was a really weird thing to happen for someone to get up on stage and stab a priest. Next, please. But I painted over it because I felt like it wasn't related to it. It was just a news story, and I ended up with salmonella as the way she is here and in the show. Next, please. And that's the end of my presentation. Thank you, Doug. It's 180 photos, so thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Any questions? Okay.
How did you choose the specific town you went to?
So the town was called Los de Marcos. It's north of Puerto Vallarta. And north of Puerto Vallarta is a surf town called Sayulita. And about 15 years ago, friends of mine were going to Sayulita all the time. And I never could go because I would Google roll-in shower Sayulita, nothing. Roll-in next year, nothing. And I knew it would show up. And one year, roll-in shower. Finally, I can go to this town where they have a shower that I could use. So I went, and that was in 2016. And we loved it, but it was packed. It was so busy. It was like 2 times as busy as Salt Spring in August. It was packed. And now we went back the next year, and it was double that busy. And everybody in town had wristbands, and we'd realized that resorts in Puerto Vallarta were sending people to Sayulita from the resort as part of the trip. So if you'd spent 2 weeks at a Rio resort, you'd get a day in Sayulita. So the town couldn't even handle it. The sewer stopped. The drinking water had gone downhill. Everything was bad, but it was busy as hell because of Instagram. Because everybody would go there and take pictures of the flags in the streets, and they were in a little town, and it's dead. The place has been killed. So long story short, it's a bar owner there was from Victoria. We met him, and his girlfriend's mom bought a house in Los de Marcos as an investment, knowing that eventually Sayulita would spill over into Los de Marcos. And by fluke, it was wheelchair accessible, like unintentionally. It just had a flat entrance and a flat roll-in shower that, they just intended as a walk-in. So it worked for me, and That's how I ended up in Lodo Marcos.
Would you go back again?
We can't because we stole the dog. Well, steal is another word for rescue. The dog was mostly tied to a post with no water, not fed. We'd see them feeding the dog eggs from the pan, and it wasn't treated well. So the dog started following us. It jumped in my van one day, and we took it on a road trip and brought it back and let it out right in front of the people that owned it, and they didn't say anything. So it kind of came with us every time we went on an adventure, and one day we adventured all the way back home with it. I looked in my rearview mirror like, oh man, if the points out on the blocks saw my van, I'm in trouble. But it never happened.
I think you could go back again.
Just not to that town. Because in the pictures you saw there was a guy taking my canvases apart from me. He lived across the street. He was actually from Paris, of all places. He ended up there. And he recently sent us a message and said, we're known as the people that stole their dog. That's how they refer to us.
I'll send them $20.
There's a lot of places in Mexico to go.
Yeah.
So
Most of the dogs are just street dogs down there.
they're all street dogs, or they're not pets. So people own a bunch of dogs, and the purpose of the dog is to bark.
Protection.
It's protection, although we didn't understand what they were protecting because these people had nothing. So there was nothing really to protect.
Their lives.
Sure, that's right. That's right. Hi.
Question about how it's so hard to like sort of gain control over the brushes and the method and get that physicality on the canvas. How are you finding that transition when you're getting other people to put the work on, say, for example, the skate park or the? Is it sort of like do you find a control thing, or is it, how are you finding that transition?
That's a good question, but it goes all the way back to rehab when I started to draw. And when I learned to draw again, that drawing became crucial for everything else I did. From filmmaking, I'd have to draw how to frame, because sometimes I would have people film for me. I'd say, go down there and film that boat. Well, there's like 1,000 angles you can get. So on the spot, I'd have to draw the composition that I want filmed. When I designed my house, I'd architecturally designed my house through drawing with the help of an architect, but a year of drawings. And over that, and then like for like my van, to show them how to build the certain things that I needed in there, drawing was everything. It's way better than words because people can see it. So over the last 20 plus years, I've learned to give up my control of having my hands on stuff, but always give the notes and the drawings to people. And it still is hard, because sometimes I want to be that involved, but at the same time you do a better job because you're not totally focused on something. You can give it up to someone else who maybe has more skills, but I have the idea. And with the sculpture, I would have liked to include more pictures of it, but my friend, I can't believe how good of a job he did. But we were together all the time, so while he was carving the styrofoam, I'd stop him, I'd go over there and I'd marker the styrofoam itself, always being involved.
Is that a big hunk of styrofoam?
It was I hate that we had to use styrofoam, but it was a giant cube. Started out just as a cube, and I drew it on the 4 sides and the top. And then he used a chainsaw to slowly cut it down, and a grinder down to a file, down to sandpaper, and then we fiberglassed it. It took 14 sessions to get that styrofoam cube down to a sculpture. Yeah. And the spray painting at the park was a little hard because it was at night and I couldn't get into the bowl, but I had the drawing and my friend took it into the bowl and did his version of my drawing. So both of those I call collaborations because I did have to give them their artistic expression in there as well. So it wasn't like Warhol would hire people to do all this stuff and call it his. I don't want to do that. Yeah, I don't know if I like that. Unless they're going to just paint my canvas black for me so I can save some time. But when it's someone else's skills making your art, I think that's a collaboration. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.